A discussion later that same day. When Michael finished telling the story, he looked around the room and saw his former classmates smiling at him. Several thanked him and said they got a good deal out of the story. Nathan asked the group, "What would you think of getting together later and maybe discussing it?" Most of them said they would like to talk about it, and so they arranged to meet later for a drink before dinner. That evening, as they gathered in a hotel lounge, they began to kid each other about finding their cheese and seeing themselves in the maze. Then Angela asked the group good-naturedly, "So, who were you in the story? Sniff, Scurry, Hem, or Haw?" Carlos answered, "Well, I was thinking about that this afternoon. I clearly remember a time before I had my sporting goods business when I had a rough encounter with change. I wasn't Sniff. I didn't sniff out the situation and see the change early. And I certainly wasn't Scurry. I didn't go into action immediately. I was more like Hem, who wanted to stay in familiar territory. The truth is, I didn't want to deal with the change. I didn't even want to see it." Michael, who felt like no time had passed since he and Carlos were close friends in school, asked, "What are we talking about here, buddy?" Carlos said, "An unexpected change of jobs." Michael laughed. "You were fired?" "Well, let's just say I didn't want to go out looking for new cheese. I thought I had a good reason why change shouldn't happen to me, so I was pretty upset at the time." Some of their former classmates who had been quiet in the beginning felt more comfortable now and spoke up, including Frank, who had gone into the military. "Hem reminds me of a friend of mine," Frank said. "His department was closing down, but he didn't want to see it. They kept relocating his people. We all tried to talk to him about the many other opportunities that existed in the company for those who wanted to be flexible, but he didn't think he had to change. He was the only one who was surprised when his department closed. Now he's having a hard time adjusting to the change he didn't think should happen." Jessica said, "I didn't think it should happen to me either. But my cheese has been moved more than once, especially in my personal life. But we can get to that later." Many in the group laughed except Nathan. "Maybe that's the whole point," Nathan said. "Change happens to all of us." He added, "I wish my family had heard the cheese story before this. Unfortunately, we didn't want to see the changes coming in our business, and now it's too late. We're having to close many of our stores." That surprised many in the group because they thought Nathan was lucky to be in a secure business he could depend on year after year. "What happened?" Jessica wanted to know. "Our chain of small stores suddenly became old-fashioned when the mega store came to town with its huge inventory and low prices. We just couldn't compete with that. I can see now that instead of being like Sniff and Scurry, we were like Hem. We stayed where we were and didn't change. We tried to ignore what was happening, and now we're in trouble. We could have taken a couple of lessons from Haw, because we certainly couldn't laugh at ourselves and change what we were doing." Laura, who had become a successful businesswoman, had been listening, but had said very little until now. "I thought about the story this afternoon too," she said. "I wonder how I could be more like Haw and see what I'm doing wrong. Laugh at myself, change, and do better." She said, "I'm curious, how many here are afraid of change?" No one responded, so she suggested, "How about a show of hands?"